The cemetery was a dreary place. It had been around for decades, constantly expanding outwards into neighbouring plots of land. The cemetery was incredibly old school, opting to expand rather than exhume and reuse graves like most modern ones do. It was insidious, eating up the world around it and converting it into grave space. I had been working at the cemetery long enough. Hell, I lived there. I live in the groundskeeper's building near the church. It had been converted into a small rudimentary house for caretakers, but I was the only one. Most of my predecessors had either quit and skipped town or come up missing. I found out why soon enough. The cemetery becomes very strange at night. There were rumours it was built over a portal to hell, and most of the townsfolk brushed off the tall tales, but I believed them. Almost every night, the dead come back to life. They wandered the grounds, eating any small animals they could find that had roamed a little too far out of the woods surrounding the property. They were ravenous. On several occasions I had seen them tear groundhogs and squirrels to shreds, masticating the bloody flesh between sets of yellow decaying teeth. I had taken to carrying a gun to make me feel safe when wandering the grounds at night. The dead were slow and dumb enough. They would lumber about wandering the grounds looking for any piece of living flesh they could turn into their next meal. More often than not, that potential meal was me. I didn't fear the dead one-on-one. It was when they moved in groups of 2 or 3 I began to fear them. Surprisingly, the dead weren't the scariest thing about the cemetery. It was the ossuary, and the thing that lurked within. Several times I had passed by the old bone house and heard horrible growls, raspy breathing, and on one occasion, a baby crying from within. The ossuary was the one place I was too scared to tread. The dead were one thing, but the unimaginable horrors that waited for me behind the stone walls of the bone house were another. I don't know why, but the dead seemed to be working with the things in the ossuary. One night, after finishing my duties, I had been walking back to the groundskeeper's building when I heard a scream cutting across the graveyard. My blood went cold. Someone had came into the graveyard to mourn a loved one and had been attacked by a corpse. I pulled my gun from its holster and made my way across the cemetery towards the sound of the scream as quick as I could. When I arrived, I saw 3 corpses dragging the body of an elderly woman to the ossuary. I sat and watched them for a moment. The corpses pushed the stone doors of the ossuary open. I couldn't help but flinch at the sight of it. I had never gone into the ossuary before, even during the day. The thought of the old bone house was enough to make me run in fear, but for some reason, my body didn't move. I stood and watched the corpses drag the lifeless body of the woman through the doors. I could hear a maddening squelching noise followed by a low and deep twisted growling. I could only compare it to the sound of every animal in the world's growls put together into one bone-chilling noise. The door to the ossuary then shut, pushed closed from the inside. The corpses never left the stone structure, but I could only assume that they were consumed by whatever resides within. I didn't stick around long after that. I ran to the groundskeeper's building as fast as my legs would let me. When I reached it, I practically threw myself through the door. I locked and barricaded it with everything I could find. I didn't bother sleeping that night. Deep down, I knew the things in the ossuary knew that I knew about them. It wouldn't be long before one of them got brave and ventured past the stone doors and came for me. I always felt comfort when I could see sunlight peeking through the cracks of the newspaper I had taped over the windows. I felt safe again. I composed myself and went to work, putting everything in front of the door back where I had found it. Work during the day was mundane enough. Cut the grass, clean the tombstones, and top off the water in the vases that had flowers in them. Some days I had to dig graves for upcoming funeral services. I was annoyed whenever I had to dig a grave. I couldn't help but focus on the futility of it. Sooner or later, whoever gets put in the ground will come back up again. I've always considered telling the priests what happened at night. Maybe they could do a blessing over the grounds or something along those lines, but the priests were very intimidating. Something about the way they spoke, the way they moved and watched me from the corner of their eyes. The priests were impossibly old, their skin paper thin, revealing highways of green and purple veins. Whenever I saw them, I couldn't help but think they were going to crumble away in the wind like old statues. But still, they persisted, carrying on with life almost as if they simply refused to die. Perhaps they already were dead. Maybe they knew the cause of all this madness. Maybe, just maybe, they were the cause. I didn't bother the priests much. They scared me. Not as much as the ossuary though. Occasionally the priest would seek me out, giving me instructions or informing me of a pending funeral that would be taking place in a few days. But other than that, they left me to my work. Whenever night fell, the priest would pile into their van and drive off in the direction of wherever they call home. But it was the only time I felt envious of them. They got to leave the cemetery during the night, while I had to stay behind. If you're wondering why I don't leave the cemetery myself, why I don't just jump in my car and drive off as fast as the engine would let me, I will not be getting into that. At least, not now. Just know, in a way, I'm bound to the cemetery. Unable to leave at the moment, but soon enough, I will be free of this place. That night, after the priest left for the evening, I did my usual routine of walking the grounds looking for any wandering undead, and for any trespassers come to mourn their loved ones after hours. After about an hour and a half of doing my rounds, I came across a lone corpse standing in a row of graves. I slowly made my way over, gun raised and at the ready. I had just come up behind the corpse when suddenly it spun around, slashing me with a hand shovel that I had carelessly left out during the day and forgot to put back in the supply shed. I could feel the blood oozing down my chest as I backed away from the undead thing. Somewhere between getting attacked and trying to register what just happened, 3 more corpses made themselves known. They had crept forward from the darkness surrounding me. I knew what was coming. They would overpower me and drag me into the ossuary where I would face the same fate as the old woman from the night before. I raised the gun and shot the corpse holding the hand shovel, the bullet crashing into her head and blowing back chunks of debris and rotten grey matter for the exit wound. I spun around to face the corpse that was standing directly behind me, but before I could react it was upon me. The corpse began flailing its arms, pummeling me to the ground. The dead were incredibly strong. My consciousness began to fade as the other 2 loomed over me. I knew what was coming. I would find myself at the ossuary doors being devoured, or worse, by whatever was inside. I found myself getting dragged by the legs through the cemetery. 2 corpses had my legs, while the 3rd had been at my front. I immediately noticed the corpse at the front was holding my gun by the barrel. I thought, if I could get my legs free, I could wrestle the firearm from the corpse and fight back before they brought me to the ossuary doors. We were getting closer. I could smell the stench of eternal death that emanated from the ossuary now. I had to act. I pulled my legs as hard as I could before my feet fell free from my work boots. The dead immediately turned to face me, but I was ready for them. I planted both my feet into the 2 corpses' chests and sent them flailing back. The corpse holding the gun was already on me. He swung it into my head with the force of a speeding semi. I could feel the torrent of blood streaming down my face. I pushed through the pain and threw myself onto the corpse. During our scuffle, I managed to wrestle the gun free. I pulled back the hammer and fired a single shot into the brain of the living dead creature. I took a moment to catch my breath and get up just in time to see the other 2 corpses climbing to their feet. I tried to fire the gun at the closest corpse, but it wouldn't fire. Was I out of bullets already? I didn't have time to think. I re-gripped the gun by the barrel and swung it at the corpse as hard as I could. The 2nd corpse fell over and I stomped its skull until the head was nothing more than putrid rotten jelly. Suddenly, I fell forwards. I forgot about the 3rd corpse. It was on top of me, pounding its fist into the centre of my back. I felt like my spine would snap at any second. I felt helpless. Like this was it. I was going to die here in the middle of the cemetery, beaten to death by a damned corpse. I had just about given up all hope before I heard the sound that made my heart skip a beat. The corpse was pulled off of me, and I rolled over to see something dragging it away. I couldn't make out what it was, but I did see it drag the corpse into the ossuary before disappearing from my line of sight. I stumbled to my feet and noticed the other 2 bodies had disappeared. My blood ran cold when I realised I had been inches away from one of the creatures that resided inside the ossuary. Why did it save me? Did it mean to save me? Was the corpse just in the way of its real target? I didn't want to think about it any further. I just wanted to go to sleep and forget this night ever happened. Unfortunately, I couldn't do that, because the ossuary doors never shut themselves this time, and I noticed a large and bloody bite mark on my forearm.